we are, third last session. Yes? Third last. First Chronicles this week, Second Chronicles next week, the Apocrypha, or as the Roman Catholics would call it, the Deuterocanonicals. You know that term, right? Huh? Proto-canonicals and Deuterocanonicals. Okay. You're smiling at me. Huh? You don't know those terms? Well, shame on me for making you feel badly. And then we'll do a little bit about, just a little about how the copies came to us, and a little bit about the age of the Greeks and some things like that as we round it out. So there'll be a lot of stuff to do that last week. It's 250 pages of reading to get prepared for it, so I will talk fast when I do those. You probably won't read all of it. Close your eyes, everybody. Close your eyes. Raise your hand if you read it all. Alan, close your eyes.
I thought you said to open them again.
No, I close them so nobody gives away what they didn't do. So.
All what?
Huh?
Read all what?
Read all of First Chronicles for today. Okay.
All except the names.
All except the names. All except the names.
Yeah.
By the time Anna came along, I didn't have quizzes anymore. I used to have quizzes at Concordia for every day for both of my classes. And my absolute favorite quiz question was the 10-point quiz, the one that was about number 8, as they were to read some sections from First Chronicles along with some sections from Samuel and Kings. And the quiz question, true or false? First Chronicles 1 to 9 is the longest section in the Bible without a single personal name. If they, yes, a lot of them did. A lot of them did, which had to prove the point they didn't look at any of it.
No, they thought it was a trick question.
No, they did not. They knew better than that. But I quit giving quizzes finally, because we'd spend half the hour arguing about whether the question was framed correctly. And then I went to simply summarizing the text. So, and with Chronicles, since we were reading Samuel and Kings, I would simply say, write down any things from the chapters in Chronicles that you did not see in Kings. All right, so just add to it if there were some things, hey, I didn't see that before, or anything that was different. But if they got that one wrong, I knew they weren't prepared. I was at the point I was going to say, well, question 8 is the only question. If you got that wrong, you get a 0. If you got that right, you get a 10. But I never quite got there. I just threw the whole bunch. Well, I didn't throw them away, but I quit using them. So, obviously, the other answer is correct. That First Chronicles 1 to 9 has lots of names in it. But that's not the only chapters in First Chronicles 1 to 29 that have a lot of names in it. Why do we have so many names?
Wasn't genealogy important?
Okay, genealogies were important, right?
Evidence?
Evidence for what?
Well, that it wasn't all made up, and also that
Why?
they,
I don't think they would need evidence for that.
and then it's just that people would, who was a real descendant of Abraham?
Okay, and more specifically, probably, who were appropriately, well, 2 tribes, which would be the 2 really important tribes after the exile, the Levites and Judah. So, connections with the king and connections with the high priest. All right, now there'll be a lot of trouble after this, which we aren't going to see yet, but it's not just chapters 1 to 9. All the way through, we have some of these things, and if you read it carefully, you would notice that sometimes it almost like repeats itself right away. So there's a couple places. It is very frustrating to read Bible dictionaries because so much of what's in them simply gives all of these names where they're not much more than this name is the third son of so-and-so who came back and was assisting in building the walls in Jerusalem or something like that. So you have a lot of it in Ezra, you have quite a bit of it in Ezra, not as much in Nehemiah, but a lot of it in Ezra and a lot of it here. If you read carefully, you would notice that chapter 9 of 1 Chronicles actually talks about them having gotten back. And then it goes into the rest of the story. So chapter 9 really is the same time period as the early part of what we would find in the book of Ezra, of those who came back to rebuild the city. And then from 10 on to 29, we have different kind of material. But if you would look carefully, you would also find out that we do not have a complete balance where we have information about all of the tribes. If you were to construct the family lineage of your grandparents, and all your grandparents and all of their kids and all of their grandkids and all of the great-grandkids and maybe even the great-great-grandkids, you would be scratching your head about maybe one of your cousins who's a grandmother and what her grandkids are named and who the wives are that they were married to. Maybe you're really good at it. But for me, it would take me a while. I would get a little foggy the farther I went away. I might be pretty close up to my cousin's kids, but my cousin's grandkids, I'd get a little bit more foggy. And so when they come back, you're going to basically have some tribes that are going to be mentioned with a lot more detail because that's the ones who are putting it together. And they'll have little vignettes, a little bit about this or that for the other ones. One might ask, why do we even have a book like this? Why do we even have all these names? Well, the priests kept good records. Does the church have any good records? We have a record of all the baptisms, all the confirmations, all the marriages, and all the funerals. And I don't go in there. Maria does all of that. When I was in Michigan, we still had the original book, the original thick leather book. And I thought that was a really neat thing to be able to go in there and continue writing all the information in. So we would have what the baptismal, or what the confirmation verses are, and who the baptismal sponsors were, and all sorts of things like that. And Maria, every once in a while, gets calls from people, could you look up a record for me? Congregations that are older get even more of those. I asked her if she would check with the church in Cleveland where Kathy was baptized. Her mother was very ill when she was born, and so Kathy was baptized in October, being born in April. Her mother just wasn't able to get out. And it just so happened the church said, we're doing a refurbishing of the sanctuary, and we have all of that in remote storage, so call us back some other day. But I just wanted to double check to make sure that we had that information correct. And so congregations will have that. I would have people call me up in Michigan every once in a while when I was running those books to know about that. But people would know what those records are. That's how I have tracked down the relatives of particularly the Trapp side of the family with records that are right now in Berlin. And I can get access to them through the Mormons. So I could probably order them the same books now that I was looking at. But I went, I don't know, two different times, I guess. One time I got in, and the other time there was a waiting list of about 3 months to get back in there again. But to try and track down, okay, where did the family, where were they? And I'm quite sure if I would look even at the handwriting of the pastor who wrote that stuff in, I would see that at a certain point When my relatives came from central Poland to Detroit, I'll lay odds the pastor came with them. And that they just continued in Detroit then, writing the same records for the younger members of the family. Because almost everybody left in the late 1870s, early 1880s from that particular area. And when the Germans lost the First World War, all of the German-speaking people were kicked out of Poland. That's where, or almost all of them, that's why Hitler says, I want my land back, and why he invaded Poland as one of his first steps in the Second World War. We're going to get that land back. But a lot of those churches had become Catholic churches. They actually sent the records all to Berlin, and they were kept actually right by the train station until the reunification, and then they built a separate building where they have all of the, they have remote storage, and they have microfiches. So I could track down when my one relative came into that community and when he and his wife died. And the kids, 3 of them died before they were married, they were in their 20s, and the other 3 came to Detroit. And so we could track that down. My grandpa and I think one other brother were born over in Poland, in Prussia, and then the rest of the family was born in Detroit, and so you see those records go on. So people keep records, churches keep records, the Levites kept records. It's about how do you know who has a right to this or that when they're setting up for all of the different people who are going to be watching over the temple from an earlier time period. If that's your family, then you're going to be interested in some of those things. So anyway, that is one little bit of overstuff. So we've looked now, we're in the last 2 books, First and Second Chronicles. Time-wise, most of that would come before Ezra and Nehemiah. Yet we do find that chapter 9 of First Chronicles really is about the same time as Ezra. And then it goes back all the way to the time of Saul. So we'll look at some of this. First of all, the main thing to notice, if you were to read the book of Kings, and part of the notation for next week, I reproduced the notes that we handed out, and I'm not sure if the Chronicles stuff was in the original notes I gave you a year ago, but I've given you the notes for First Kings and Second Kings, and then I've said, so First and Second Kings is Second Chronicles. First and Second Samuel is First Chronicles. So today we're looking at what we cover pretty much through the end of David's life, and David dies in 1 Kings 2. So it just nibbles its way in there a little bit. So what you have in the notes here for 1 Chronicles would be the equivalent of 1 and 2 Samuel. What you will have from here on for 2 Kings is going to be first and 2 Kings will be 2 Chronicles. So 4 books become 2. 1 and 2 Samuel becomes 1 Chronicles. 1 and 2 Kings becomes 2 Chronicles. You can look in the sheets, and just what I want you to notice is as you're reading through Chronicles, I'm going to tell you, here's what was going on in Kings. Next week, it's even more crucial to do that. Here's what's going on in Kings, and oh, by the way, here are some things that got written in Chronicles that you might want to watch for. So some of the things are more unique than others. Yes, Kathy?
The time of when they were written.
They are probably written down during the exile.
Both of the Kings and Chronicles?
No, Chronicles.
Yes, the Kings.
The Kings would have been written down earlier.
Separately.
They were available to the people who are doing the Chronicles writing. So they've got that information, plus they have other stuff that's not in 1 and 2 Samuel, 1 and 2 Kings. The genealogies primarily. We have a lot more information than you do in Samuel or Kings, and so they're filling in other parts that wouldn't have been available. But that brings me to the next comment, because in 1 and 2 Samuel and 1 and 2 Kings, for the whole thing, but primarily for the First and Second Kings material, it says, here's what was going on in the northern kingdom, and oh, by the way, here's what was happening in the south at the same time. In Chronicles, it says, here's what was going on in the south, and oh, by the way, every once in a while there were some interactions with the north. The guess is that in both cases, whether it was the people writing 1st and 2nd Samuel, 1st and 2nd Kings, or 1st and 2nd Chronicles, that they were all of Levitic stock, that they were all Levites, because as descendants of Moses, they would have continued the story. They would have looked at Deuteronomy, and they would have said this, as we enter the land, God says this is what's going to happen. And so they talk about it as the Deuteronomic history. So Joshua, Judges, Samuel, and Kings all are framed according to how did what Moses said in Deuteronomy turn out. He told them they would finally leave and lose their land, and that's exactly what happened. And 1st and 2nd Chronicles doesn't sound like that at all. 1st and 2nd Chronicles is much more interested in Jerusalem and the temple. And when they went back to reestablish worship. They were not as concerned about reestablishing kingship, but worship. Yes, Jim?
My Bible has an introduction, First Chronicles, and they indicate that it was written about 430 BC.
Mm-hmm.
And according to this, it talks about what happened between 1000 and 960 BC.
Yes, because that's the era of David. David, usually he's dated like 1004, 1003, 1002 to 961 or something like that. But the first 9 chapters go all the way back to the beginning of time.
Yeah, they talk about in the introduction. The first 9 deal with his royal line.
Yep.
And then after 9 it's David.
Yep. Though chapter 9 goes all the way to the exile,
Yeah.
and then it pops back. So the first 9 chapters would cover from the beginning of time through about 500 BC. Now, whether it's written during the exile, this would say that it was written after it. This would say that it's written even around the time Ezra comes back. And that's a kind of a toss-up. My Old Testament prof at the Senior College and Seminary, Ralph Klein, said he wasn't sure that the same people responsible for Ezra and Nehemiah were responsible for 1st and 2nd Chronicles. They all have their lists, but a lot of it is information like what we have in 1st Chronicles here is going to be a lot of the lists about who was responsible for worship at the time of David. And then later it's going to, so that'll be interspersed between 10 and 29. And then you'd see some of those people, the descendants, who are listed in chapter 9, who are still responsible. But those are all guesses of exactly when it would have been written. The very end of 2nd Samuel, or of 2nd Chronicles, is going to say, Cyrus let us go back to rebuild. And the 2nd Kings just says that Jehoiachin was delivered from his imprisonment and sat at the king's table after Nebuchadnezzar died. But the next one will go to the end of the Babylonian Empire 20 years later, and we'll say we got to go back home. But the important thing, the thing that I think has to be at least jumping out at us, is that the real desire is, let's go back and worship in Jerusalem. Let's go back and set up again what was set up. I've told you that from everything I've understood, Herod built a new temple and then tore the other one down because it's called the Second Temple. I'm reading an older Bible dictionary right now, which, and I've got to check this in Josephus, that says that it took 1.5 years, he tore it down and rebuilt it. I don't know why it's not called a third temple then, so I've got to investigate that a little bit more. But when you read the Bible dictionaries, so many of them, particularly like in the H of the alphabet, there are so many names that begin with an H. I just can't wait to get the J. And a lot of them with EL for Elijah and a lot of those. But a lot of them, they'll just take every one of these names and list them. But you might find, if you read this carefully, you'll say, hey, I see Nathan there as a son of David, Daniel as a son of David, etc., and all sorts of different kind of things. And what will happen is, I think some of these names can be used as many as 18, 20, 22 times. All right, so in other words, it's not like we only have one time that any name is used in the Bible. A lot of them would repeat many times, and so you've got to say, which is this one? And then there are spelling issues. And then the old commentators and Bible dictionary guys would say, and sometimes there were copyist errors. Instead of saying that the Bible disagrees, they would just say there were copyist errors. Or maybe they had different lists and the list was wrong. So all sorts of different little kinds of things. Sometimes they'll have an H on the end of an AH, or sometimes just an A. One of the real common kind of problems is the letters that look much the same. So if you have a Dalet, a D, and a Resh, an R, the Dalet is like this, and the Resh is like this. And when you have teeny tiny letters, your copyists may actually think they know what the word is and not. And so you're not always getting people who are spelling things right or writing them the same or correctly, or just in the copying, you have somebody who says, oh, they made an error, and they're making an ancient correction when there was none to make. I have done that in translating. I saw the name Ehrman, E-R-M-A-N. And I did not know that Adolf Ehrman was a very, very famous Egyptian scholar. The editor of that volume that I was translating was Siegfried Ehrman. And I changed it to that in one place and introduced an error into the book, not knowing I was doing it. And it was at a place where I thought somebody called someone on the phone and they heard Ehrman, because Ehrman and Ehrman are pronounced the same way. Okay? It may be Ehrman, and you don't know if it's Herman or Ehrman. And so I thought somebody did a verbal mistake over the phone. And then I began to see Adolf Ehrman's 5 volumes pop up here and there and some other stuff, and I said, oh goodness. So in the last volume, I simply said, on this page, change this to this. I didn't tell them how dumb I was. They could figure that out. And a couple other things. But those things are going to happen. So you're going to have some spellings, some with extra letters in, and some with all sorts of, where it doesn't look the same, and where they'll say, well, this was just a copying mistake or something like that. But believe it or not, all those lists, people have taken every time, every one of those words occurs in the original language, and matched up who's the father, who's the son, who's the grandfather, and all of that, and laid them all next to each other, and my eyes glaze over. Though 2 of my professors wrote commentaries on 1 Chronicles, so they must have really liked it. But it's very challenging to track it all down and say, okay, now how did this and that take place? Yes?
I was just saying that there's so much in there to really confuse a regular person, you know?
Well,
To throw it off and to take us away from what God's Word is.
I disagree.
Well,
I disagree. I
You have
think
that right.
our question is, how do we understand this also as God's Word? Rather than to define God's Word and then say this doesn't fit, rather to say this is also what God wanted, recorded, and saved for us. Let's understand why this is all here. I'll give you the briefest answer I can give on the whole thing. Worship is very important in the Hebrew Scriptures. When you go back to Exodus 19 to 25 to 40, when you get into a good bit of Leviticus, early part of Numbers, it's all the building of the tabernacle and furnishing it. You have a whole bunch of chapters with the story of Solomon, which is the building of the temple. The strange thing here is that in Chronicles, it says that David was the one who got all the materials ready. He said, my boy Solomon is kind of a young kid. So I better get all the work done. God won't let me build it, but I'm gonna get all the work done and ready for it. But this one really screams out, and so does Exodus and Leviticus and Numbers. Deuteronomy more with the sacrificial system, but this other just getting it going to say this is important that people worship their God. Down to the fact, as I mentioned back when we did Exodus, it feels like you're going through Menards. And you feel that with some of the latter part of the Chronicles too, with all the stuff that he ordered and stockpiled and got ready so that they would be ready to build when Solomon came along to do the building. And so I think part of my job is to say, why is this important? Rather than this isn't God's word, and why did they put it here? Why did they consider it to be inspired? And I think it's because of that whole thing of what in Latin they call the mysterium tremendum, coming into the presence of the Almighty and being able to come to worship and acknowledge sin and acknowledge mercy and everything like that. And this was all the framework for that. So to me it's very important, but not something that jumps out when you're stumbling through all the names.
So this is the framework to worship.
This is the framework that says it is very important for believers, for human beings altogether, to worship their God.
Yeah.
This is all the stuff that goes with it. You know, you can go to a voters meeting and look at the budget and say, my eyes glaze over when I see all those numbers. And a lot of people will say that, but those are all part of how do we make sure we have a place of worship, a place from which to go out and share the gospel, a place to have educational opportunities, and that gets into all those little line items along the way. They're all part of the deal. And so, to me, part of my job as a teacher is to say, I need to kind of put it all in perspective that values it. Because my first read through is, oh, look at all those names. But then to start saying, what else is going on with that?
Yeah.
And 1 Chronicles 17 with the promise to David, one of your descendants will always rule. It comes all the way through the thing. You know, and so the Messiah part of it is in there too. But as we saw with Haggai and Zechariah, the Messiah, the king, didn't come back yet. The priest did, Yeshua, but Zerubbabel was nothing but a governor. And they said we have to wait for that to happen. And all of this is within that framework of being ready for the fullness of that restoration of the relationship. So it says here, we're going to look at how it got started under David. And then we're going to be ready to go and re-establish all of that. So David's kingship is not as important as his role as worship leader. That they knew they could go back and do. They got the temple vessels from that Nebuchadnezzar took. Cyrus and Darius send those home. Ezra brings some more of them home. So it's really saying it is important to have that happen.
Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah. So we'll look at the details now, but that's a little bit of the overview. So let's go to chapter 1. I'm not going to read all these to you. You hope not.
You don't have time to read the whole.
You want to bet?
He could.
I'll bet you if I started reading right now, I could be at least in about chapter 11 or 12. So don't tempt me, sir.
I know you're a speed reader,
We'd be all
but
asleep.
Huh?
We'd be all asleep.
Well,
We'd get
what's
glossy.
wrong with that? You know, you get the same credit whether you're awake or asleep, right? You get the credit just for being here. I am going to read the first 4 verses. Adam, Seth, Enosh, Kenan, Mahalalel, Jared, Enoch, Methuselah, Lamech, Noah, Shem, Ham, and Japheth. We just covered 11 chapters of the Bible. All right? Not completely. There's a few more things in there. But we get all the way to the flood. And then we're going to get the descendants of Japheth and Ham and Shem and some of those other ones. We're going to get to Abraham, Isaac, Esau. I don't know where Jacob is in there. Why I didn't type that in. Isn't he there? I guess he didn't show up here yet. I don't see Jacob in the early part of that. So, anyway, Jacob is going to show up then in chapter 2 with these are the sons of Israel. So, but then we're going to find out, okay, the normal thing is if you have a group of people who are somehow related, but they're not the direct line, you kind of push them off to the side. So what would be in Genesis chapter 35 is the last part of 1 Chronicles 1, all of the stuff about the Edomites. So we're already in chapter 35. So you might say, hey, this is a great book. You don't have to read as much. You don't have to read all 50 chapters of Genesis to get through the stuff. You just read this and zoop, you're through it right away. But did they know the story? Yeah. Those stories have been passed down. This is just kind of the headlines. It's kind of the things of, oh yeah, we know about how all that takes place. But, so then the Edomites, later they'll be known as the Idumeans, from whom Herod and some others come. So chapter 2, the descendants of Israel. Another name for Israel? Don't think too hard. Jacob. Okay, Jacob or Israel. Here called Israel. And so chapter 2 then is going to be particularly about Judah. Now that's surprising. Why? I would expect that Levi would be listed first with the worship, because the priests are doing the deal of pulling this together, or at least saying he was responsible for that. But here we're going to have all sorts of the family members of Israel: Reuben, Simeon, Levi, Judah, Issachar, Zebulun, Dan, Joseph, Benjamin, Naphtali, Gad, and Asher. What do you notice there? All of you biblical scholars do. Well, the last two should be Joseph and Benjamin. Where's Manasseh? What are Joseph's two kids' names? Ephraim and Manasseh. Where are they? Count the number of names. You have 11 or 12?
11.
12. Reuben, Simeon, Levi, Judah, Issachar, Zebulun, Dan, Joseph, Benjamin, Naphtali, Gad, and Asher. So where are Ephraim and Manasseh? How do you get to 12? Levi gets kind of put off by himself, and Joseph becomes 2 tribes. It's actually 13 altogether. Okay? But not in the same order that we're used to. And then Judah has 3 sons, Onan, and Shelah. And then it says that his daughter-in-law Tamar also bore him Perez and Zerah. What doesn't he tell us? Doesn't tell us that Tamar was supposed to be married to Shelah after died because God was unhappy with him about some sin and slew him, it says. And then Onan, it said he spilled the semen on the ground. He wouldn't get his sister-in-law pregnant. And so he also dies. Tamar finally dresses up in the clothing of a prostitute, has sex with Judah, is impregnated, has Perez and Zerah. Remember the one where the little boy sticks his finger out first and they tie a red string around and he pulls it back in and the other one's born first? It just says here, and by the way, his daughter-in-law Tamar brought him 2 children as well. Doesn't say anything about the story behind the story. Did they know it? One would assume so. But this is just listing the names. So just think if we didn't have Genesis, how much we wouldn't know about what's going on with all of that. I bring that up already now, as well as the Noah thing, because it doesn't talk about Canaan and the curse and everything that comes on Ham and Canaan in this, and yet that's going to have a big play in what we're going to look at later. So much of the story is not here. What do we know about it says back in chapter 1, the sons of Abram are Isaac and Ishmael. Shouldn't you write that Ishmael and Isaac? Ishmael was born first, wasn't he? Born chapter 16 of Genesis. Isaac is born in chapter 21. But here it's Isaac and Ishmael, so a lot of the details aren't here. About Sarah getting angry with Hagar and throwing her out, and then the angel coming to Hagar and saying, go back and button your lip and be a good handmaid. And then finally, when Ishmael is playing with Isaac, then Sarah says, you gotta send her and her son away. I don't want them playing by my kid anymore. And so none of those things are there. The order can be different. There's reasons maybe for who's the most important one. You have to guess at all this. But if you're reading very carefully, you'll realize there are a bunch of things not being said. I'll play my hand on this one right now. There's another Tamar who doesn't get mentioned at all. David's oldest son, Amnon, who seduces his half-sister and rapes her, and then she has to either never get married or is going to have a terrible marriage because she's not a virgin anymore. And Absalom later will kill Amnon. None of that's here. You get toward the end of it with Adonijah, who thought he could become the king, and he's getting anointed when Solomon hears about it, and Bathsheba, and they hurry up and get Solomon anointed. Here it sounds like David had plenty of time in Chronicles to make all the arrangements and to announce Solomon was going to become the next king. None of the troubles that happened in the family are listed. You wouldn't get the foggiest notion that there were palace intrigues going on by reading Chronicles. Now you can make of that what you will. I'm sure the people knew it. Those stories were not brand new. They had heard those along the way. They would have learned those in Saturday school or whatever along the way somehow. Some of them would have known it anyway. But the chronicler doesn't choose to talk about that because he's on a mission. Let's get worship going again. So it's going to say, okay, who came back and which groups came back, where you know a lot of them, not as many. So, chapter 3, we have the sons of David. First of all, the ones that are born in Hebron. Now, does it say anything about why David is in Hebron? Nothing at all. When did he go to Hebron? After Saul died. He goes to Hebron for a while, and then all the northern tribes come and say, we want you to become king, and then he will go up to Jebus, or as it's later called, Jerusalem. All right, so the things that are going to happen later, and we're going to hear more about, not all of it, of course, but some of it is already here, and all it says here is these are the sons that were born to David in Hebron, including Amnon, Daniel, Absalom, Adonijah. Daniel disappears. Other places he's listed as number 4. He's also listed some places as Kiliab. The name is Kiliab as the other one, but Amnon, Absalom, and Adonijah are all involved in who's going to become the next king. We're going to see that replicated or talked about more in detail in 1 Chronicles 17. So this is just giving some of the vignettes. Some of it they're going to come back and talk about. But then the rest of chapter 3 has the descendants of Solomon all the way down to Shealtiel and Zerubbabel, Barney Rubble's uncle. And so Zerubbabel is going to be there. And so we have some of that all the way down to the return from the exile already here. Yes?
Is there any record of how many sons David had?
Not an exact count.
Because mine
You
says
can
he
count
had-
the numbers. I don't know, it's 14 or something like that.
More than that, I think. Then it says he had sons born to his concubines.
Yeah, I don't remember the exact number. I don't remember the exact number. Yeah, well, the idea was, and it's not everybody who's getting multiple wives. That's usually for kings. They keep it within their family. They keep the power within their own family, though that's also what happens sometimes when those kings brought the kids decide to do each other in, and whoever's last standing becomes the next king.
Right.
We've got some of those stories as well, so. It never gets condemned, which is why the Mormons would say, well, it's right in the Bible, people have more than one wife. So we should be able to do that. And by the way, I'm guessing that comes next in our country. Why do we limit people to how many husbands or wives they can have? Okay, we've got same-sex marriage now. I'm guessing that one's next, and I've heard some people talk about it. How narrow-minded are you that you won't let people have as many husbands or wives as they want? Wait for it. My guess is we're going to hear about it within the next 10 years, if you don't hear about it a lot sooner. And we're going to be hearing even more about active euthanasia. Why can't people decide when they want to end their life? Why should they have to sit around and wait to die? That's already legalized in a couple of our states. All of a sudden, when the needle turns, you can have things happen very quickly. We are a country with the tyranny of the 51%. If 51% of the people who vote for something, it becomes law. Of the people who vote, okay, it might only be 20% of all the people, but if they're the ones that vote and they voted in, other people say, I don't care. So if you look at how many voted for and against same-sex marriage in our state, and look at the number of eligible voters, you're going to say, well, a majority didn't vote for it. Just a majority that voted for it.
Yeah.
And you get that around in the whole country, and so the ones really for something, they'll make sure they whip up their crowd, and the other crowd says, I don't expect that's going to happen. And but you can vote in anything. You can vote in that everybody is going to get a free $1 million check from the government every year. I'm waiting for that one.
Oh, my.
Yes, I'm first because I said it first. So, but anyway, so you'll see some of these things that'll stretch all the way down in chapter 4, the sons of Judah, and then a little bit about the sons of Simeon. Well, where is Simeon on the map? Where are the Simeonites located? Oh, now I'm going to make people go prowl around in their poor little Bible.
Samaria?
No.
Oh.
Way down southwest, down by Beersheba area and down by the border with the Philistines. They disappear pretty quickly from the scene. So the people of Simeon, it's said in Chronicles, some of them moved east and went underneath by the Dead Sea and went over across to like where the Edomites lived, or that they went and attacked where the Amalekites lived, which could be both south and east. Steve, excuse me, one of those still had fluid in it. Has that been drained? Yeah, you may as well pour that out and make it lighter. Anyway, it says some of the Simeonites went, so they show up very little. In fact, most of the tribes show up very little. You're not going to see much about Zebulun or Asher, Naphtali a little bit, Gad, Manasseh, not as much. You'll see Ephraim more, you'll see Judah, you'll see Levi, and you'll see Benjamin. Those are the tribes that really play the largest role. Benjamin, of course, being the tribe of Saul, Judah being the tribe of David. And the Levites, of course, with worship, and then the Ephraimites, which really is the middle third of the country. Manasseh's farther up to the north. So you don't have an equal billing when you go through the Bible to look at what happened to all of those tribes. Many of them, maybe there will be a judge or two that show up from some of the tribes, but it's going to be all strange kind of stuff. It's not a complete equal balance, but the Simeon, that's where I went for our archaeological dig. Kathy and I dug down a little east of Beersheba. Lived at Tel Sheva, and we dug at a place for 2 months that was a little bit east of that. And I was so smart about things, I wasn't thinking that that was the land of the Simeonites. That's what I found out there. So you have to go there sometimes to figure it out, and then you look like a fool that you didn't know that. So I kind of escaped that one. I listened before I made the mistake. Yes, Kathy?
So for the purposes of Chronicles, they're talking about Judah at this time.
Well, they're talking about the tribes that were there at various times and what happened to them. So they know the most about the tribes that went into exile and came back.
When there was a split north and south,
Yep.
I assume Simeon was still,
Simeon disappears.
before
It's-
that?
Yeah, it says he went and attacked the Amalekites according to this, and just kind of disappeared altogether. You just don't hear any more about him. It's almost like he was absorbed into the tribe of Judah. You just have to live with it.
Was Judah so isolated and not uncaring and not thinking they were part of Israel that they didn't even care what was happening to Simeon?
No, they probably took the land over.
Judah took the land over?
Judah just, took over whatever
that's
Simeon
right.
vacated. Kathy, it's not there, so I can do no more than
I'm
foolish
just-
speculation about what they would have been thinking. All we know is Simeon disappears from the scene pretty
Yeah.
quickly.
Right.
Can't do any more than that for you. Now, the sons of Gad. Well, tell me about Gad and another tribe and another half a tribe. They're on the east side of the Jordan, up by the Sea of Galilee. So Gad and half the tribe of Manasseh, and Reuben, which is more east of Judah, and then Gad is in there, and Manasseh is up north of the people of Ephraim on both sides. The land across the Jordan, it says, well, that crowd got taken into exile by Tiglath-Pileser III. All right, he rules from 745 to 727. That's the first part that was taken away. So he makes it into an Assyrian province, and he takes a lot of those people and resettles them in various parts of what we would know now as Syria, as northern Syria. He's trading people back and forth already across the Jordan and then in the northern kingdom. That's the group of people who would have been moving in that later, at the time of the return, would have been known as the Samaritans, which some of them were the people who had been born there and were part of the tribal groups. Part of them were people who had been moved in. And so they say, we don't think you're pure stock anymore, so we don't want anything to do with any of you. But anyway, so little hints along the way. We're just in chapter 5, but we're getting a lot of the history of what happened all the way through 2 Kings, 1 Kings and 2 Kings. So this is all 2 Kings stuff that we're looking at in 1 Chronicles 5. So we're doing a kind of a quickie of all of the history of Israel from the birth of the world to the end of the southern kingdom by the list first, and then we're going to come back and see some more detail in the rest of 1 Chronicles in second. I just want you to know so that you're not completely lost when you're looking at it. So now, 1 Chronicles 6, now what do we get to? So we've seen a little bit about Reuben and Manasseh. We haven't seen anything about Ephraim. We've seen a little bit of Naphtali and Asher and Gad, maybe a little bit. But now, the sons of Levi. Gershon, Kohath, and Merari. It's about the ones who served, the ones who exiled. Now we're going to start getting much more detail. No surprise. This is the family. They've been keeping these lists all the way along. And so it'll talk about some of the places where they lived and all of that. And some of them, remember, the Levites are scattered throughout all 12 tribes. They get 48 cities with their villages. So I never know quite whether they are the pastors or the cops. And the answer is yes. So they were both to share the promises of God, but also to keep people in line according to the law. They were the law teachers. Now, the ones in the north finally got booted out. they were told, we don't need you anymore. And so the Levites up in the north, and they're not mentioned specifically here, they would have been the ones that some people say kept a record of everything that was going wrong in the northern kingdom. And at the end of 2 Kings 17, when the northern kingdom finally got destroyed, not by Tiglath-Pileser, but just after him by Sargon II, or Shalmaneser V and Sargon II, who actually destroyed Samaria. Then some of those Levites went down south and kept writing 1 or 2 Kings 18 to 25, which says, oh goodness, the Southerners saw what happened up in the north. They didn't pay any attention to it, and now the same thing happened to them. They got taken away as well. So that's going to be much more the Levites who are the historians. Chronicles is much more the Levites who are the worship leaders. Okay, so the Copts and the priests, the pastors, or the priests, okay? So the Copts are talking more in how did it all fall apart, how did they break all the laws, that's Joshua, Judges, Samuel, Kings, and the priests here, the pastors, are the ones who are going to do how did it all fall apart, and how are we trying to keep that worship thing going. So anyway, it just says that they're scattered all over everywhere. Then chapter 7, we have just the little hints of a little bit about some of the other ones. Naphtali, I notice, is the shortest one. So Issachar, Benjamin, Naphtali, Manasseh, Ephraim, and Asher. Chapter 8, little bit of Benjamin, and then Jael, the father of Gibeon. You wonder whether in Star Wars they didn't just go in and rearrange some of the letters a little bit here. They could have done a nice job of getting a whole bunch of names just from this. And then the last of those, of the immediate thing, is Israel's enrollment by genealogies. Judah went into exile due to unfaithfulness. So now we are at the very point of going into exile. We've gone from chapter 1 through from the beginning of time. Now we're actually down to about 586 when they went into exile. Okay, by the time we get here. Pardon? With the Babylonians, yeah. And so then it says, the Israelites, the priests, the Levites, the temple servants get to return. Some of Judah, Benjamin, Ephraim, and Manasseh even gets mentioned here a little bit. Priests, Levites, gatekeepers, temple servants are mentioned. Singers and Jael's line gets mentioned as well. So it's not just lists of names. It's a connected narrative of here's what happened, here's who started with it, here's a few people coming back that we can mention along the way, but you'll notice there's no kind of an equal time for what was going on with Reuben or what was going on for the tribe of Naphtali or Asher or any of those. That's, even though Naphtali is where Jesus is later going to grow up. Okay, Nazareth is up in the land of Naphtali, just kind of to the west of the Sea of Galilee. So anyway, now we will take a break, and then we will wander our way through a little bit of the story from Saul in chapter 10, which is going to explain, here he is, and let's get him out of the way. So all of the other stuff that we would know from 1st and 2nd Samuel about Saul doesn't really come in here, about how he gets chosen by Samuel and the donkeys that they're looking for and all the rest of that stuff. Now we get to 1 Chronicles 10 to 29 first. 1 Chronicles 10 to 17 let's look at. And what we have here now is really the chapter that says, okay, how do we get Saul out of the way? All the thing about Joshua, all the thing, so bringing the people into the land, taking the land, all the things about all the judges, not a word. Not a word about Samuel's birth, about the donkeys getting lost, and Saul is going and looking for the donkeys, and Samuel anoints him, and then says, you're going to become the king. Nothing about the battles, nothing about his unfaithfulness, except going to the witch at Endor. So all the rest of it doesn't get mentioned. It simply says, how did David become king? And so all the rest of that, it will talk about how Saul and his kids got killed. Nothing about David's friendship with Jonathan. It just gets rid of that. Did they know about it? My guess is yeah,
Enjoy.
but it's not part of the reason why Chronicles is written. I've often talked with people because you look at, well, I could look at writing a book, and I would say, well, how do you leave anything out? And a lot of times they say you don't write a book until you're competent in the subject. Well, you never get competent in everything. So how do you tell a story? Like if I were to say, well, I'm going to write a book about the tribe of Naphtali. I would be talking about any interaction between Naphtali and any of the other tribes. I'd be doing a lot of guesswork. I'd look at a lot of names. I have another one of my professors who wrote about the Mushite Levites. That was the title of his dissertation at Harvard. And Mushite means the Mosaic Levites, the Levites connected with Moses. Remember, most of the Levites in worship are connected with Aaron, Moses' brother. But there's little hints here and there in Chronicles as well about where Moses might have had some priestly kind of connections, and his descendants. Somebody was talking with me about Dan at the break. Dan is actually served as a tribe up in the north by someone who's connected with Moses. And they were so irritated about that later that some scribe apparently put an extra nun, an extra n in there, and made it Manasseh instead of Moses. But other copies show that Moses would have been up there. And so is there a tension between Mosaic Levites up in the north and Aaron Levites in Jerusalem? And is there a whole big bunch of tension going on that we know nothing about, of why they would say, well, we should be worshiping in Bethel, not in Jerusalem. And so the relatives of Moses may have been fighting to stay with the original worship site where Jacob saw that ladder going up and down in the heavens. So people who will look at them and, wait a minute, what's going on there? And for us, it's just kind of a passing glance, a car going by in the other direction at night. But there are people who look carefully enough to say, there may be more to the fight that's going on between north and south than just who's the king. It may be different ideas about worship, because Jerusalem is a Gentile city. Maybe it's not the best place to be having the temple built. Anyway, it doesn't get played big here. People of Jabesh Gilead come to bury Saul's body. His head was taken back down to the Philistine area, and the Jabesh Gileadites had been helped by Saul earlier, but the only good thing that Saul did in his reign, that he helped them when they were being told that they were going to have one of their eyes put out if they didn't succumb to the people across the Jordan, and Saul came and helped them. So when they hear that he dies, then they bury him. Later he'll be buried in his father's place of burial, father's cave or whatever. But it says he died because of unfaithfulness. So now we get to David. So we don't have anything about the fact that David was, at least at this point, it will mention it, but that David was in Hebron for 7.5 years, and then for 30 years in Jerusalem. And Hebron is about 20 miles north of Beersheba, 20 miles south of Jerusalem. Kathy and I drove by there from time to time. It's where Kiryat Arba would have been. It's where Abraham would have been buried. Okay, and Sarah and some of the other family members. Right now, it is maybe the only one in the world where half of the building, it was a Crusader building, half of it is a Muslim mosque, the other half is a Jewish synagogue. And about 500, the last I heard, 500 Jewish people said, we have a right to live here. And so they have many, many armed Jewish guards who have to watch over the place to protect the 500 of them, the 50,000 Palestinians living around them. And there was a Jewish doctor from New York who went in with a gun and killed probably about 40 of the worshipers. This is probably 20 years ago now, and was then killed. They never got to take account of how many were there, but he went in as if he was going to the right and went to the left, I think is the way it works, and killed a bunch of worshipers. But anyway, back at this time, They have to take the city of Jerusalem. Jebus goes all the way back to about 1800 before Christ. We're about 1,000 before Christ right now. And so probably just that eastern hill that I talked about, that Nehemiah would have just built that eastern hill, that eastern wall back up. But then it gives a list of the many of the chiefs. Talks about a battle one time where he's down in the south and he says, "Boy, that Bethlehem water sure tastes good." And three of the big the boys in his own protecting army go and get him some water. He says, "I can't drink water where you guys could have lost your life for it," so he pours the water on the ground instead of drinking it. But every once in a while, a little kind of a vignette, not in Kings, as far as I remember, but in Chronicles. And then he has there are three of them who are more important even than the 30, and Abishai, I think, is the one I think this here in Benaiah. They'll show up at other places as well. Then you have a variety of people who are, first of all, listed. So who were the warriors who were with David at Ziklag? Now we're actually going backwards, because Ziklag was when David was given a city by the Palestinians, by the Philistines, because he was willing to fight against Saul. At least that's what they thought. And so he would go make raids against the people raiding Judah, and then he would come back and said, "I made a raid against Judah." And the people of Gath, they didn't know, Achish, the king of Gath, he didn't know where the stuff was coming from. But David was getting the loot back that some other people had been taking from his relatives in Judah, killing all the people who were taking the loot, so there was no one to squeal on him. And he makes the people of Gath think he's on their side. Achish says, "Let's go up against Saul," and he's marching up, and it says, finally, well, he didn't really go against Saul. But the other four chiefs, they say, "Yeah, we don't trust him. He may turn on us." And so God gets David out of real trouble. It's one of those real neat things where God causes suspicion among the other four kings as they're going to take the whole central and northern part of the country over. And so they say to him, "Go back home." And as he goes back home, he gets a whole lot of soldiers on his side. And that's a little bit about what's going on here. And so some of the warriors, when Saul dies, then they go over to David, and some others, they go and when they got back home to Ziklag, they found out that all of the soldiers and all wives and all the kids and all the property had been taken. And that's when God says, "Go after them and get it back." Everybody's alive, and there's an Egyptian kid who was sick, who told them, "If you don't kill me, I'll tell you where they are." And they feed him and get him strong again, and then they go get it back. Now that stuff's not all here, so we just get little teeny bits about that he gains an army along the way. Then as he is in Jerusalem, he says, "Okay, I at least want to bring the ark up to Jerusalem." Where had the ark been? Well, at the time of of Saul or Samuel, Eli's two sons, Hophni and Phinehas, lost it to the Philistines. Remember, it went to 3 different sites. Ekron, I think, was the last of them. And when they finally were with a lot of plagues and everything among the Philistines, they put it on a cart and sent it back. And it got as far as Kiriath Jearim, and that's where it stayed for a while. Many of the people there died. And then they moved a little closer eventually. But so David says, well, let's go there and get the ark up to Jerusalem. And that's when Uzzah puts out his arm as the oxen are stumbling. They should have been carrying it on poles. Instead, they had it on a cart, and he touches it and gets immediately eternally zapped, or who knows what. He died anyway. And so that's when it says here that Uzzah died at Kedon's threshing floor. That's not in Kings. It doesn't tell us where he died. But then we are told that the ark is put in Obed-Edom's house. That means a servant of Edom, but he sounds like one of the Levites in Chronicles. So they leave it there for 3 months, and it says David was afraid of God. What kind of God is going to do that to you? And when you're trying to do something nice, and you still get trouble for it. So anyway, they let us know about that, and then the ark is at Obed-Edom's house. So now they're bringing that up, and they finally get it back up to Jerusalem. And then King Hiram of Tyre begins to offer the opportunity to help with building a nice house for the ark. And we're going to have some delay in that, because God's finally going to say to David, I don't want you to be the one who builds the ark. King Hiram of Tyre is often connected as somebody who knew the perfect plans. And so when you talk about many of the people who would be involved in lodges and trying to get more perfect all the time, they would connect that with him, who had the perfect idea of how to build a temple. And so some of the lodges, the Masonic orders, are connected with that, masons who would be doing the building. Then it says David perceives that God is with him. Here's where we have the thing about some more of the wives that he takes in Jerusalem and some more of the sons. Now it just gives the details, but we had already seen the kind of listing early on. Then Rephaim is a valley just south and west of Jerusalem. It's where they said most of the gardening was done. Okay, you got to get your food from somewhere. And so that's where the vegetable gardens would have been to supply the city, south and west. And the Philistines are trying to nibble away at Jerusalem and make trouble for David. So God says, go ahead, you can defeat them. And they take all their idols that they had brought along and they burn them, so it must have been wooden figurines. And then there is another attack that they're going to do. And David says, should we go with them or not? Or should we go up against them? And God says, well, this time, and we don't know, through the prophets they say, this time kind of go around from behind. And I never knew this text until my Aunt Donna remarried, and Lee Spence, her husband, said that, you ever hear that story about the balsam trees? I learned about that in Sunday school. And I guess I went to the wrong Sunday school because I had never heard about the balsam trees. But what it says is, when you hear, anybody else know about the balsam trees? Yeah, you all went to the wrong Sunday school too. I'm sure we haven't taught it here either. He said that, what the text says is, God is going to send his army in with you. So the heavenly army, the Tzivaot, what we know as Sabaoth, not Sabbath, but Tzivaot, the Lord's army, when you hear them rustling the leaves as they're coming in to fight with you, then go and you'll win a victory. In other words, you're not fighting all these battles by yourself. I'll go with you. And that's the end of the Philistine threat. Okay, after that, the Philistines say, man, we aren't going back up there again. So earlier they had sent back the ark some decades before. Now they get attacked and defeated, and so they're not going to be a problem anymore. But it's kind of fun, the different ways in which you think you know something about the Bible, and there's always something brand new to learn. Always something. Somebody says, I know about this one, I know about that one. So anyway, David builds his own house, first of all, and then he prepares to build a house for the ark. So they bring the ark up now, and everybody is trying to look for making sure they do everything just absolutely right and perfect. And David, it says, is clothed in a linen ephod, which probably would have been just a special kind of a short garment, maybe. His wife sees him, and in Samuel, in 2 Samuel, she gets very irritated with him because she says, you're exposing yourself, you're showing off what should be kept private. We don't know how dressed or naked he was, how he was dancing. But she said, you're showing off for all the girls. It just says, that's all it says here. Who was Michael? by
Saul.
Saul's daughter. Okay, that's the one where first daughter Merab was given away, and then the second daughter Michal becomes his wife. And at that moment he says, okay, no kids for you. We're not going to have sex anymore. Doesn't say it here. It just says she was irritated with him. But that also makes sure that none of David's children can ever say, we are of Saul's family. So it puts an end to Saul's children. And because Saul had killed some people that they were to leave alone, where they had the people who had come seemingly from a far country and had actually been from the land, Saul killed some of them, and two sons of Merab and 5 of Rizpah, his concubine, those 7 were killed. But then, so Merab's kids get killed, and the concubine's kids get killed, and then David says to Michal, you're not going to have any kids. So in essence, Saul's complete family, the grandkids that could have been around, are all wiped out as well. So it draws the line for a full end for Saul's family from Benjamin, and then gets back to Judah. So anyway, chapter 16 then, there is a tent that David sets up for it. It says he blesses all the people, and you're going to start seeing a lot more about worship here. So there are 3 who are connected with being leaders in worship, Asaph and some of the other leaders, then at this point then they're praising and thanking the Lord. We get all kind of like the liturgy of what was going on as they were doing it. It says even all the peoples and the heavens and the seas, everything is going to praise or rejoice that God is being worshipped there. Now, the temple is seen as if it is the umbilical cord between the heavens and the earth. So remember that the ark is going to be the footstool for God. It's like if he's down there, he's got his feet up on the ark, and the cherubims are to the sides, and if you want to consult God, the priests would be able to consult God in the temple and get guidance, and you wouldn't just have it from prophets. So anyway, they are here, they are working on beginning to build this, and David has been getting things together, and so he says, okay, I'm going to build that up. This is, in my mind, along with 2 Samuel 7, with the other version of it, the key chapter of the Old Testament to understand who Jesus is. Okay, this is the key chapter. 2 Samuel 7, 1 Chronicles 17. So I'm going to read this one to you. You get to hear something and you read it by yourself. So a good bit of chapter 16 was this hymn of praise, which is from Psalm 105, and I think a little bit from one of the other Psalms. So chapter 17, now when David settled in his house, David said to the prophet Nathan, I am living in a house of cedar, but the ark of the covenant of the Lord is under a tent. Nathan said to David, do all that you have in mind, for God is with you. But that same night the word of the Lord came to Nathan, saying, go and tell my servant David, thus says the Lord, you shall not build me a house to live in, for I have not lived in a house since the day I brought out Israel to this very day, but I have lived in a tent and a tabernacle. Wherever I have moved about among all Israel, did I ever speak a word with any of the judges of Israel, whom I commanded to shepherd my people, saying, why have you not built me a house of cedar? Now therefore, thus you shall say to my servant David, thus says the Lord of hosts, I took you from the pasture, from following the sheep, to be a ruler over my people Israel. And I have been with you wherever you went, and have cut off all your enemies before you, and I will make for you a name, like the name of the great ones of the earth. I will appoint a place for my people Israel, and I will plant them, so that they may live in their own place and be disturbed no more, and evildoers shall wear them down no more, as they did formerly, from the time that I appointed judges over my people Israel, and I will subdue all your enemies. So we got the little hint about the judges part of it. Moreover, I declare to you that the Lord will build you a house. Translate house? Nope. Family, dynasty. Okay, so it's a play on words. Okay, Lord's gonna build you into a dynasty. When your days are fulfilled to go to be with your ancestors, I will raise up your offspring after you, one of your own sons, and I will establish his kingdom. He shall build a house for me, and I will establish his throne forever. I will be a father to him, and he shall be a son to me. I will not take my steadfast love from him as I took it from him who was before you, Saul, but I will confirm him in my house and in my kingdom forever, and his throne shall be established forever. In accordance with all these words and all this vision, Nathan spoke to David. Then King David went in and sat before the Lord and said, Who am I, O Lord God, and what is my house that you have brought me thus far? And even this was a small thing in your sight, O God. You have also spoken of your servant's house for a great while to come. You regard me as someone of high rank, O Lord God, and what more can David say to you for honoring your servant? You know your servant, for your servant's sake, O Lord, and according to your own heart you have done all these great things, making known all these great things. There is no one like you, O Lord, and there is no God besides you, according to all that we have heard with our ears. Who is like your people Israel, one nation on the earth, whom God went to redeem to be his people, making for yourself a name for great and terrible things, in driving out nations before your people, whom you redeemed from Egypt. That would be the only reference we'll have at this point to Joshua. Okay, so we had a little reference to Judges, now a little reference to Joshua. Nice historical summary. All stage one. Here's what God had done for his people. We haven't had stage 2, 3, and 4 yet. Okay, this is just David's time. That's all going to come, what we've looked at already. Whom you redeemed from Egypt, and you made your people Israel to be your people forever, and you, O Lord, became their God. And now, O Lord, as for the word that you have spoken concerning your servant and concerning his house, let it be established forever, and do as you have promised. Thus your name will be established and magnified forever in the saying, The Lord of hosts, the God of Israel, is Israel's God, and the house of your servant David will be established in your presence. For you, my God, have revealed to your servant that you will build a house for him. Therefore your servant has found it possible to pray before you. And now, O Lord, you are God, and you have promised this good thing to your servant. Therefore may it please you to bless the house of your servant, that it may continue forever before you. For you, O Lord, have blessed and are blessed forever. All right, so this is the birth of the Messianic promise or prophecy. This is where Nathan says to David, and then David in his prayer responds. And this prayer is not in that full form in Samuel, 2 Samuel 7. It's much more articulated here because it's more of a worship book. It says, you said you would take care of my family and you would make of me a great name, and that my descendants are all going to sit on the throne. How long did that last? Maybe a little past 1000 BC. How long did it last for his descendants on his throne? About 586, with Zedekiah, the uncle of Jehoiachin, who is taken off into exile. When they come back, well, Shealtiel is there, Sheshbazzar is there, Zerubbabel we've talked about a lot, and if you look in the book of Matthew, you'll see after Zerubbabel a whole list of names, 14 names from the exile to the time of Christ, but no more king. Who does Jesus come before when he is on trial? Before the priests. And not even the priests, the sons of Aaron, but a direct line, but a separate line that we'll look at. The last week we talked about the Maccabees and the Hasmoneans, who were not the head priests. They weren't the chief priests, but they were the ones that went and fought back against the Greeks under Antiochus Epiphanes. And so we'll find that there is no talk of kingship. What do the disciples ask Jesus? Well, Lord, when are you going to restore the kingdom to Israel? That's based on this text. So technically, if somebody says Abraham was looking forward to the Messiah, That would be an odd statement. If it says Abraham was looking forward to God keeping his promises to keep them protected and safe, that'd be different. If David expected to hear what he heard, he would have said, oh, I'm the one, huh? Just like Mary would have said, oh, I'm the virgin, huh? Instead of saying, how can this be? She's, oh, we've been talking about that for years. Apparently they hadn't thought of it in that sense. David was not expecting that his reign was going to be forever. Let's face it, 400 years isn't bad. Okay, the northern kingdom had, I don't know how many different dynasties along the way, probably 6 or 7 of them. But here in the south, except for a few years when there is a queen who thinks she can rule, well, her grandson's life has been spared, and then he comes back and she gets killed. We have that little thin thread with Joash. Other than that, that line continues. So are there people in Jesus' day waiting for that? Yeah, but not necessarily so clearly that they've been talking about, is this the one, is this the one? So when Jesus does come along and does begin to restore the kingdom, not just to Israel, but to the whole world, they reject him. This guy, he doesn't fit the bill. Where's his sword? If you're going to be a Davidic ruler, where's your sword? And Jesus says, my kingdom is not of this world. If I wanted to, I could have 12 legion of angels come to help me, he tells the disciples. But he's coming to restore all the children of Adam. The first verse, the first word in 1 Chronicles. I'm not sure that the writer of 1 Chronicles knows what he's saying, but the promise is really going to go back, and so Paul will say Christ is the new Adam, to get us back into the eternal relationship with God that Adam and Eve had before they sinned. And so Paul says what we missed was when it says through Abraham and his seed all the families of the earth will be blessed. We didn't realize that that meant that all nations were going to be blessed. In Jesus' day, you could become Jewish and then enjoy the blessings, and proselytes is what they called them. And Jesus says that there were a lot of Jewish missionaries going out throughout the ancient world trying to make proselytes. Well, they saw that these people at least tried to live a good life. They tried to be honorable, unlike a lot of others. And so they said, we'd like to join in with you. The trouble is that when they became Christian, a lot of them said, well, first of all, we have to make the converts Jewish and then Christian. And that's what Peter runs into up at with Cornelius, where he says, I went up to tell him the story, and the Holy Spirit fell on him, and I'm not going to fight the Holy Spirit on this one. He became a Christian right away. And I had this insight that I got at the end of a very long weekend down in Florida of talking for probably about 20 some hours straight, and then I had a church service and a little time to reflect on one of the lessons, and the Lord gave me one. He said, think about it this way. Peter says, yeah, I know Cornelius is a pig, but we don't have to first make the pigs into lambs and then Christian lambs. The Holy Spirit makes the pigs Christian too. And I had chapel the next week, so I had a student draw for me a picture of a lamb and then a picture of a pig. And so I had a cross on each one. And you don't go from a pig to a lamb. You don't go from Gentile to Jewish and then to Jewish Christian. You go right from being a pig to being a Christian. We're all the pigs, so just understand that. Okay, that the outsiders, if you were Jewish, like Peter was, and he was still trying to live by Jewish rules, first you wouldn't eat any of the unclean food, and you would never go into a Gentile's house. Never. That would make you unclean. You were not going to do that. And so Peter goes only because he's been told to go. And then Cornelius says, tell me your story. And then the Holy Spirit falls on him and his family. But Judaism, particularly when they come back, and what we saw with Ezra and Nehemiah, where they say get rid of any foreign wives and children, they have this kind of separatist niche that they go to, and we can't be connected with anybody else. And the New Testament blows that all apart. Says, no, now this is for everybody. People who have been Christian for a long time, who are of the Gentile persuasion, still look at others and say, well, they wouldn't fit in, they're not like us. So we still think of ourselves as the believers, and then other people who are outside that as the Gentiles, but we are too. And so Paul in Romans is going to say, don't get caught up in thinking that somehow you're any closer to God because you went for 3 years of confirmation, you memorized all those hymns and Bible verses, and you've been to church every Sunday. The person who walks in the door and hears the gospel and becomes a believer is as holy and perfect as you are before God. Here, we're getting into that more separatist, narrow kind of thing that isn't necessarily listed in the Bible, but it's the way people would interpret it. Anyway, chapter 18 then, David goes on and he does what the king is supposed to do. He goes and he defeats Philistia, the Moabites, Zobah, Aram, Damascus, all the way northeast. Hamath up to the north offers to be at peace with them. And if you look at the land that was promised to Abraham and to his seed, from the great river, which is the Euphrates, up by probably one of the bends in the river up towards Syria, all the way down to the Wadi El Arish, not the Nile, but a wadi bed that flows out of the Sinai into the Mediterranean. That's where they don't have snow plows, they have sand plows. They always have sand plows going back and forth to keep the road open because the sand blows so much. But that's the land that now 1 Chronicles 18 tells us that David took. So the land promised to Abraham 900 years earlier now is taken hold of by David. The land of Israel today is nowhere near that big. Okay, nowhere near that big. But maybe, I think I figured out once that for that size, 9 of the promised land would fit into Minnesota. So it's 1/9 the size of Minnesota at its biggest. Right? And it's basically a land route between Mesopotamia, Iraq, and Egypt. It's a trade route. It's sort of like going around Chicago where 90 and 94 and 80 and whatever, 294 and all that all come together around the south end of Lake Michigan, and they kind of splay out in different directions. And so that's where they were doing their trade and their travel. And God says, I'm going to let people all see you sitting under your vine and your fig tree, enjoying the evening and not being worried because I'm taking care of you and I'm blessing you. And you don't have to be like all the other nations. So it didn't work that way, but so it is. So anyway, then you have it says Abishai killed 8,000 Edomites. He probably didn't do that all by himself.
Yeah.
Okay, he's the leader. Other places say that David did that instead of Abishai, who was one of his generals. All right. There's a big squabble that goes on. It's never going to be solved with the numbers in the Old Testament, because the word Eleph can mean 1,000. But it also, an Aleph is a tribal chieftain. And so there are times when people wonder, should this be like 18 tribal groups instead of 18,000? Because some people will say, well, you look at those numbers, all those people wouldn't even fit in the geography of what you're talking about. But it may have been 18 family groups. Later it becomes the term 4,000. But it's really hard to know when you're translating something and a word can mean different things. I remember I was really astounded once when I was about 10 years old. And I forget what this was, but it was some sort of a can that it had like pickups, it was like pickup sticks or something like that. But there was something on the side of it that said 1,001 uses, or 1,001 games. I was impressed that someone had counted up to 1,001. Oh, that's pretty interesting. Wow, did they? Then I kind of figured out maybe that was just kind of hyperbole. And that was just to say there's a lot of different ways you could use it. It would be just as easy, and there's nothing wrong with figuring out how you translate the Hebrew word to say that sometime Aleph, which means a tribal chief, would be the people with a particular tribal chief, rather than that it has to be 1,000. Later, by the Septuagint time, they're translating it as 1,000. But it may be easier to translate it the other way. I'll let you do with it what you want. But some people have said, if you got to put all those people down together, like 1 point whatever million it is, all together, there just plain isn't enough room for that many people to stand there. And whether all those people came or not. So it is a way to say the Bible's not wrong, but we're not sure about how to translate some words, and that can make some issues for us as well. So do with it what you will. I don't care what you do with it. I'm just informing you that sometimes when people are saying the Bible is wrong, it may be because of an issue that is hard to deal with. Like when it says that God hated Esau, loved Jacob and hated Esau in Malachi. I think probably a better translation would be chose Jacob and rejected Esau, because Esau had been attacking the people of Judah, or didn't choose. But as soon as we use the word hate, then we're getting into terminology where people say, well, I don't want to read the Bible. It's about God hating people. And it may be our translation that's the problem, rather than what the word is. Because words can have a range of meaning. And if you take the range of meaning into account, then you realize that sometimes that's where I think you need Bible teachers, where you pick up a translation, you think, oh, what, this is terrible, and we're rejecting something that really shouldn't be there. Or something where somebody just, they think this is the proper word for it and it may not be, and I've lived my life translating books. And I realize how a little different nuance, one place or another, can make a big change. And so you want to say, what's really going on there? And sometimes it's, I remember one that I was struggling with for the word, a couple of words in German for the word for the church and the world, sacred and secular, would say that there are realms where God stays out of it. But we use the word, I use the word not eternal and temporal, I think was the words I used, but temporal, because saecula is just the things of this world. So that God is in charge and in control both of eternity and the things here on the earth. And there is nothing outside his purview. And so he's involved in temporal realm. Maybe I did temporal and spiritual realm, I think is the way to do it, not eternal. But I've seen people translate it differently. And then it's so easy to say, well, that means that there's things that God ought to not mess with. Luther was not saying that. He was saying God's involved through the secular, or through the worldly rulers, and through the church rulers. But that means really to be careful with those things. And so sometimes it's, at least you know that there are issues that can often lead someone to reject the Bible for no good reason. Anyway, chapter 19, Hanun, the son of Nahash of Ammon. Nahash was a friend of David's. He helped him when he fled from Saul. His son gets kind of put out and thinks that David is kind of making trouble instead of saying, I'm sorry your dad died. And so they mock the servants who came to say, we're sorry. And then there is, because what they're really doing is saying, we don't want to be under you anymore. And so there are always people who are going to test. I was very interested in how many people that have caught a little bit of are in trouble in Turkey because of the attempted coup. You got to have a whole bunch of people on your side, and there are going to be thousands of people that will lose their life if it goes the way they're talking. And you'd rather get rid of a whole bunch of them, and we'll teach you a lesson. And so that same kind of thing was going on there. The Ammonites looked for others to help them, and victories did not come very easily. And so Joab goes and he defeats the Ammonites. Then David returns, and this is at the time of Bathsheba. Not a word said about it. Okay. It just says that they defeated him. But this is where he stays at home. Not a thing. Some of the Philistine cities revolt one last time and are defeated. generations of the, let's see, of the giants, the descendants of the giants. The Rephaim, the Nephilim, the giants that lived around in there, the Philistines were actually real short people. They came from the islands in the Mediterranean and brought with them the ability to work with iron. This is the beginning of the Iron Age when David is living. It's in it a couple hundred years. And so the Philistines were really some tall people like Goliath, but also the ones who knew how to do metallurgy. The Egyptians wouldn't let them come in, but they let them live nearby. And so they probably made a nice agreement where the Greeks came in, the Philistines and the Caphtorim and the Pelatim, I believe, and the Kasluhim. They come in and they probably said to the giants, hey, we've got this new tool. We'd be glad to live among you. We'll make work easier for everybody. The Shephelah is nice, gently rolling hills that could be plowed much more easily with an iron plow than with a wooden plow or even a copper or a bronze one. So anyway, chapter 21, it's now we get into something where in the Samuel material, it said that God incited David because of something or other that went on in the northern kingdom to do a census. Here it says Satan, the Satan, the adversary, did that. And we've talked a little bit about Satan and the Satan with the Job story. Here, why would you not count, why should you not do a census? What's a census at this time? Why would you be doing a census? Yeah, decide how many soldiers you have if you want to go into battle, or what kind of taxes are you going to charge, and how much money can you get from people. So those are the two major reasons. And so God says, I'm with you, I'll deliver you from all your enemies. You don't need to worry about anything of census. And even Joab, who is kind of a bad fellow a lot of different times, he says this is not a good idea. But anyway, they go and they do this census with Levi and Benjamin are left out of it, and that's when God says, I'll offer 3 punishments to you. You can have 3 months or 3 years of war, 3 months of famine, or 3 days of pestilence. So, well, pestilence is going to come from you. I'll take the 3 days of pestilence. And 70,000 people, take the numbers as you will, up in the north die. And as the angel of death, remember the angel that went through in Egypt, killing all the firstborn? He stuck around. So he's kind of hovering off to the side. And so the angel stops at the threshing floor of Ornan the Jebusite. Now, if you would look in 2 Samuel, it's Araunah the Jebusite. So spellings have changed, same root letters, but different vowels have developed to come along with that. Anybody know the name of the nursing home, the Jewish nursing home that used to be right across from the fairgrounds? Huh? Sholom.
Shalom.
Sholom. S-H-O. That's more Ashkenazi, Russian and Polish. Shalom would be more South European, if my memory serves me right. So different pronunciations of the vowels that go along with the consonants. Well, Ornan and Araunah would be the same kind of thing. Everybody knows it's the same thing, the same consonants are there, but they were pronouncing it differently as the time went on. So anyway, Ornan, the Jebusite, is, he says, I'll give you this. Well, this is very important because this is where David is going to plop down the temple. A place where God has been gracious. There was a day, probably 20 years ago now, when I was teaching a weekend class for teachers who needed their colloquy, their religion courses. I was doing the Old Testament course down in Cedar Rapids. And I taught my classes first and second hour, and Friday I only had first and second hour classes, and then got in the car and I got down to Zambroda. Now, going down 61, right?
Yes.
Is it 52? 52 there.
61.
Whatever it, no, it's 52. 61 would go down by, huh? Yeah, that, no, I was taking 52, just north of Rochester.
Yeah.
Okay? And just as you get into town, the road curves a little bit. Tommy was tired. Tommy was looking for a place to pull off, but Tommy's eyes went closed. And where the road curved, Tommy went straight. Luckily, thankfully, no culverts. So I woke up bouncing along in the middle of the highway. I still remember a guy looking at me shaking his head like, what in the world's the matter with you? Guess what? I woke up.
Yeah.
I didn't go very far, pulled back up, there was just some tall grass that caught under the car, and I went on my way. Had I been somebody who would acknowledge where God's mercy was experienced, I would have bought a little plot of land and built a little shrine there, a thank you shrine. That's how David buys the land for the temple, where God's wrath turned to mercy. This is where 1 Samuel ends. I'm sorry, 2 Samuel ends. It doesn't end with the death of David. It ends with purchasing the land for the temple. High place, it's where the Dome of the Rock is now, up there. And in fact, there are many who say the very rock that's in the center of,
Is that Mariah?
That's Moriah, because that's where in Chronicles it says that's where Abraham, well, Mount Moriah is mentioned in Chronicles and only one other place, but it's said that that's where Abraham had Isaac, and where he was spared. Go among the mountains of Moriah, he's told back there, and the only other time Moriah is mentioned says that Moriah is Jerusalem. So, in fact, Judaism says that the rock that's under the Dome of the Rock is the rock on which God formed Adam and then put him in a garden in the east. So he had to be somewhere west. So then he puts him in the Garden of Eden down by Bahrain, down by the Persian Gulf, and that was the place where Abraham was, where Isaac was spared. Now David sees that. So a lot of that's tradition, okay? Traditions can come about anything. I have a map from Egypt of, I think it's the 19 places where Joseph and Mary stopped on their journeys after they left Bethlehem to flee from Herod, and the miracles that took place at those, including one where there is a little handprint on the underside of a rock, and they say that rock was going to fall on Mary and Joseph and the baby Jesus pushed his hand out and pushed that rock back and left his handprint. Now I've talked to Christians from Egypt, who say, yeah, what's your problem? Who would say, yep, that's exactly what happened. Rather than who would say, I'm not so sure about that. There is a cave in Bethlehem, just a quarter-mile east of the Church of the Nativity. Did you guys get in that cave? With the brown-robed guy with all the, every once in a while they scrape it all off. It's a white, calcium, limestone cave. All the other ones around are not. And they say, there's a brown-robed monk brother who says this is the place where, as Mary and Joseph were fleeing, she stopped to nurse Jesus. Stopped to nurse Jesus, and a drop of her milk fell on the floor of the cave and turned the cave white. And so that's the story they tell. Okay, that's tradition, right? And at least that's what they were doing in 1972. I don't know, are they still telling that story?
No, it's got a new story.
Got a new story? Stories change depending on the money they need, right? So anyway, but they call it the milk grotto. Maybe you didn't get to the milk grotto. They got to tell that story. But they didn't call it the milk grotto anymore? Well, somebody tore the sign down. But anyway, those kinds of things then, so this is why they are going to build it there. Inflation rules because the amount of money that David pays in 2 Samuel is not the same as he pays here. He pays much more money here I forget how many shekels of silver versus the shekels of gold. Well, so they're figuring out, at the time they're back now, what would it have cost? They just transfer that to the amount of money. So then it talks about how David starts the project, the building project, and Solomon is charged to build it.
So the one thing that there is a connection, you say the threshing floor is the site
Is
of
the Holy of Holies.
Dome of the Rock.
It's the Holy of Holies rock in the Dome of the Rock.
So that's substantiated.
That's attested, that is said, that is claimed,
Okay.
that is as far as we go.
Okay.
Okay?
Yeah.
That's as far as we go. So,
We need not question it any more than that.
well, it's, so much of this stuff is traditions. Our church has them too.
Yes.
We have certain interpretations of Bible passages where if we say something any different, well, that's not in the Bible. It may very well be in the Bible. But we've learned a certain way to explain it. And so somebody's going to say, well, we know our answer. How can you say that that's not right? Did Martin Luther nail the 95 Theses on the wall or on the door of the church at Wittenberg? Some say no. Some say no. My friend Bob Cole, he says whether it was mailed or nailed, it was posted. So we've all heard that story. Okay? The question is, would the laity who don't read Latin have anything to do with looking at the door? Did Washington chop down the cherry tree? Well, Pastor Wheaton, is it, in 1832 came up with that story? And everybody knows it. We've got ours too. And I'm not saying all of this stuff didn't happen a certain way. I'm just saying that there are times when stories kind of outrun themselves. Here, the basic thing that Kings doesn't say, Kings talks about Adonijah, trying to become the king, Absalom's death, Amnon's death, Bathsheba, Tamar, none of that is there. The students liked that because when they had to read the Chronicles section one day, they didn't have to do anything in Chronicles, because there was a whole chunk of Samuel that there was no Chronicles for, which was partially proving the point. All they want to talk about is what's going on now. So the leaders are told Solomon's a young kid, and so you'll have to help him out. And so David, it says he appoints the Levites to help with building it and all the families, and who's going to do the worship and who's going to do the vacuuming and the dusting and all those kind of things, and which families are assigned. They have 24 groups that are listed from the families of Aaron, Eleazar, and Ithamar. The other two, remember the older two, Nadab and Abihu, got killed for offering unholy fire, and fire comes down to consume them, and so the younger two are involved. Then the people who are going to be involved in worship, and lists of the groups and the leaders, so you've got a lot more names here as well. The divisions of the gatekeepers and who's in charge of the treasury, what do you do with the booty that's won in war. The people of Israel who worked for David, all of the people who are involved in being taskmasters for the farm, the vine, the orchards, and the herds. So it's much more like a collective. You're going to give it all to the king and make sure that they're doing a good job with all of it. Then the officials talk about the temple construction, and Solomon is given the plans to do that, and then David lists all the stuff that he has gathered together for the work to get done. And then it says David's exploits are in the books of Gad, Nathan, and Samuel. We don't have the books of Gad and Nathan. They are the two prophets who talked to David after Samuel has died. But that's among the things that either got lost or got incorporated, and you're just not by name. Anyway, next week we'll finish the Old Testament. We've done 48 of these now, if you've shown up for all of them. So we have 2 more to go.